morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Kids Time. I'm Mr. Chris, and today I have another story for you about our friend David and his nemesis or his enemy, King Saul. But before we get to the story, I have a question for you. Have you ever been afraid? Or maybe a better question is, what are you afraid of? Today, our story talks about fear, something that all of us experience from time to time. Our color for today is yellow. Now I know you're probably wondering why we're using the color yellow. After all, yellow is a happy color. It's the color of the sun, sunflowers, little baby chickens. There is nothing sad, there is nothing mean, there's nothing depressing about the color yellow. But we are using the color yellow to talk about fear. You see, about 200 years ago, people started to use the color yellow to talk about their friends who were afraid, people who were considered cowardly. We don't know why, but for some reason, the color yellow became associated with fear. Like I said earlier, fear is something we all have. There are over 60 different fears that psychiatrists and doctors say people have. Perhaps you have some of these. For instance, are you afraid of spiders? If you have to have mom and dad come and step on every little spider you see, then you have what they call arachnophobia. Are you afraid of stepping on an airplane like many people are? Then you have what they call aerophobia. If you are afraid of being in very tight, confined spaces, then you have what they call claustrophobia. And then there's one that lots and lots of people have. It's called glossophobia, or the fear of speaking in public. You see, there are lots and lots of different fears that people have. And today we're going to find out the best way to deal with our fears. Now, our story today takes place right after last week's story. If you remember, last week we talked about envy and how King Saul was so envious of all the attention David had received and all the praise David had received that he took a spear and he threw it at David. Now, right after David left Saul, he went to his friend Jonathan, King Saul's son. And it says in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 1, that David asks Jonathan, "What have I done? Why is your father so mad at me that he tries to kill me?" Now, Jonathan goes on to say that, David, you must be mistaken. My father would never try to kill you. Something else must have been going on. But David, once again, asks Jonathan, Jonathan, what have I done? You must believe me when I say that your father tried to kill me. What have I done to make your father so angry? Well, Jonathan says, I don't know. I really don't know why my father is so mad at you. And David and Jonathan decide to come up with a plan, something that they can do to find out if King Saul is really angry with David or if David is just mistaken and King Saul is, in fact, happy to have David around, pleased to have David around. So down in verse 5, David and Jonathan start putting their plan together. And it says, David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I should not fail to sit at the table with my king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the 3rd day at evening. If King Saul misses me, then tell him, David asked me to leave. He asked me to let him go back to Bethlehem, where his family was, so that they may sacrifice together as a family." In verse 7, it says, if King Saul says, "Good," then David will know that King Saul is happy. King Saul is pleased with him, and King Saul is not really trying to kill him. But if King Saul is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. So David and Jonathan have come up with this idea, this plan. David is going to go hide. Instead of being with King Saul during this festival, he's going to go hide in the field. And when King Saul asks where David is, Jonathan's going to tell him he went home to visit his family. If Saul is happy and says, okay, that's fine, then David will know King Saul is not angry with him. But if King Saul gets really angry and says, David's supposed to be with me, how could you let him go home? Then everybody will know King Saul is really angry with David and that he did try to kill him just a short time before. Now Jonathan, he's very smart, and he comes up with a way to tell David what King Saul says. And Jonathan says that, David, when you go hide in the field, I will go out to the field with a young man from the city, and I'm going to shoot my arrows. And we're going to pretend that it's target practice. And when I shoot the arrows, I'm going to have the boy go fetch them. And if I tell the boy, you've gone too far, the arrows are like behind you, then you'll know it's okay to stay. But if I tell the boy, you still have to go further to find the arrows, then you'll know that, David, you have to run. It means my dad is looking for you. So, the festival starts. In verse 25, it says, the king sat on his seat, and Jonathan sat opposite him. And on the first day, Saul did not do anything. He thought David was missing because the Bible says he was not clean. Like he had not prepared himself to attend the festival. He did not take a bath, so he couldn't go. Saul did not really care that David was not there. He thought David would have a really good excuse or a good reason not to be there. On the second day, though, he noticed that David's space was empty, and he asked Jonathan, why isn't David here? And Jonathan tells him just what he and David talked about. He said David had gone home to Bethlehem to be with his family so that they may sacrifice to the Lord together. And it says in verse 30 that Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said to Jonathan, basically, you're in trouble. He got so angry with Jonathan for letting David go that he took a spear and he threw it at his own son. And it was then that Jonathan knew Saul, his father, was really trying to kill David. The next morning, Jonathan and the young boy from the city went out into the field, and it says, Jonathan shot his arrows and told the boy, run and find the arrows that I shot. And as the boy ran, Jonathan called after him, is not the arrow beyond you? You know, keep looking, keep going further into the field, and you will find the arrow. When the boy came back with the arrows, Jonathan gave his bow and the arrows to him and said, return to the city. David came out from where he was hiding and fell on his face, bowed 3 times, and started crying. Jonathan had saved David's life, but David was forced to flee because Saul was trying to kill him. What was David afraid of? He was afraid of losing his life. What was Jonathan afraid of? You know, in addition to dodging spears thrown by his own father, he was afraid of losing his best friend. We're all afraid of something. But what can we do, or who can we go to when we're afraid? You know, if you're afraid of the dark, you know, if there's a loud noise at night, if you don't like thunder and lightning and things like that, or if you find a big old hairy spider in your bathroom, you can go to mom and dad. You can go to grandma and grandpa. You can go to somebody you trust to help you feel better. But if somebody's, you know, trying to do something really bad to you, or you're really afraid, the first person you should go to is God. Pray to him, talk to him, tell him that you're afraid. You know, if you're told you have to speak in front of the class at school when you get to go back to school and you don't want to do that, or you don't like doing that, talk to God. He will help you. He will give you, you know, the courage and the strength to do that. You know, we are all afraid of something. And God has given each one of us friends and family members to help us. And he is more than willing to listen to our fears, our concerns, and he has promised to help us. So, boys and girls, when you're afraid, talk to God. He promises to help you. Thank you for, you know, sitting through this lesson. Thank you for paying attention. I look forward to talking to you again in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.